On the line with us is Sarah Kendzior, the writer and scholar, co-host of the Gaslit Nation podcast, which I listen to regularly. It's one of the really great podcasts out there. Sarah, her website, SaraKendzior.com. Sarah Kendzior also is her Twitter handle, and also at Gaslit Nation. Sarah, welcome back to the program. I read this Twitter thread that you put out yesterday, I believe it was, maybe the day before, and about Merrick Garland, and learned a whole bunch of stuff I had no idea about, and it is extraordinarily troubling. Can you bring our listeners and viewers up to speed on this?
Sure. I'm not completely certain which thread you're referring to.
It's the one about Merrick Garland as a Mafia state enabler.
Yeah. I mean, all that is a, factual recollection of the things that Merrick Garland has done since being appointed Attorney General, which is a really horrible list of protecting Trump, protecting the Trump administration, not protecting America, and acting in many ways as a personal attorney for Trump in a similar fashion to Bill Barr. And this is, obviously distressing and disappointing because so many people saw Garland as somebody who was going to remedy this corruption within the Department of Justice. So he's just continued it. And so, among the things he's done is protect Trump in a personal lawsuit against E. Jean Carroll, who says that Trump raped her. He's defended things Trump and Barr did in office, like the violent beating and gassing of protesters in the summer of 2020. He's covering up the obstruction of the Mueller probe. He's defending Trump's persecution of journalists. He's refusing to, of course, prosecute the people who planned the January 6th attack on the Capitol, especially high-level elites like Michael Flynn, Roger Stone, and, of course, Steve Bannon. And then a very alarming thing is Merrick Garland defended McGahn against congressional staff, against congressional Democratic subpoenas. So now there's this big question about, well, what's going to happen to the, Steve Bannon situation, that they actually did subpoena him. And, of course, he defied it, and it's going to go to the DOJ. Will Merrick Garland protect Steve Bannon? My guess is yes. I do think that that's what he's going to do, and I think Joe Biden should fire him because he's not protecting the country. He's just protecting this narrow band of corrupt elites. I'm
with you. About 5 months ago, I actually wrote an op-ed calling for Merrick Garland to be fired. What I didn't know was the background on him. I mean, what I did know was that he was appointed to the federal bench by Bill Clinton. When Barack Obama had an opening on the Supreme Court, he wanted to get it. At that time, there was a filibuster. The filibuster was in place for Supreme Court justices, and so he needed to get 60 votes. So he went to Orrin Hatch, the Republican senator from Utah at the time, and said, please give me the name of somebody who has some Democratic, association, like was appointed by a Democratic president, but who would be acceptable to Republicans. And Orrin Hatch gave him Merrick Garland's name, and thus Merrick Garland became the appointee for the Supreme Court. And I think that because President Obama, a Democratic president, appointed him, a lot of Americans concluded that therefore he must be a great Democrat, maybe even a great liberal. It turns out his background is quite different. Tell us about the person who mentored him and where Merrick Garland came from.
Yeah, absolutely. That person is Jamie Garelick. I just want to make one comment that I think it's not just that Obama nominated him, it was the Republican blowback from people like Mitch McConnell. And so it left Americans with this impression of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that wasn't the case. And I think that, the press fell for that narrative big time. But anyway, Merrick Garland started out in the Clinton Department of Justice when Jamie Garelick, this deeply corrupt kind of big law operative, was working as Deputy Attorney General. And she's basically like this Forrest Gump of corruption. Like, she's at the fringes and sometimes at the center of all of these major controversies of the last 30 years. With 9/11, she was the person who wrote the memo that basically prohibited free communication between the FBI and the CIA and, helped lead to the 9/11 attacks. I'm obviously not saying she caused them, but, the difficulties in communicating that she did cause helped allow those attacks to take place. She then went on to defend big oil, British Petroleum, using her connections with the Obama administration to help them get away with oil spills. She was involved in a massive financial scandal at Fannie Mae and pocketed over $25 million from that corruption. And I can go on and on. She's currently working for Amazon. She's busting up unions. She represented the University of Phoenix. She represented opioid, big pharma peddlers. But one of the worst things is that when Donald Trump became the president, she decided to become Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump's lawyer. And she's the person who helped him get past these anti-nepotism laws that are supposed to prevent, the abuse of executive power and this kind of dynastic kleptocracy that the Trump family was seeking. And she helped them maintain their positions in office. And, she really has this attraction to the absolute worst, most reprehensible people and causes in this country. And, I remember reading about her and I was thinking, wow, she reminds me of Alan Dershowitz. And then I traced for, who mentored Jamie Garelick. It's Alan Dershowitz. So there's this straight line between Dershowitz, Garelick, and Merrick Garland.
And Garelick was the mentor of Merrick Garland.
Yes. I should be clear that Garelick mentored Merrick Garland, brought Merrick Garland into the Clinton administration. He was her right-hand man. She refers to him as, her wingman, and she's still defending him today. She goes out and writes these, op-eds and says basically, Trump administration people should not be prosecuted. And the conflict of interest here that one, she was a lawyer for Jared and Ivanka, but also she's this lifelong, very close friend, colleague, they went to college together, like 40 years of friendship and professional, relationship with Merrick Garland. Like, she's not some neutral observer. And I think she's a very bad influence, and that this conflict of interest, with their relationship should have been brought up at the confirmation hearings. But the problem is that, Garelick is part of this cesspool in Washington, D.C., just, recurring throughout multiple administrations. And I think that, many senators, many representatives are tangled up in this world. So they maybe wouldn't find it so aberrant as I do.
Yeah. I had been operating, until I read your piece and got Merrick Garland's backstory, I had been assuming that the problem was that there were a bunch of Trump holdovers in the Justice Department and the FBI, or maybe not even necessarily Trump holdovers, just, right-wingers. I mean, law enforcement tends to attract right-wingers and authoritarians, and that they were sabotaging Merrick Garland's efforts to do what President Biden and most of America want him to do. Now I'm concerned that we have, what's the old phrase, the fifth column, that we have, or there's probably a better one, that we've been basically infiltrated. The Justice Department has been captured by the most corrupt element of the corporate wing, the bought-off wing of which is increasingly a very, very small fragment of an increasingly small fragment of the Democratic Party. It's still arguably the majority, but the progressives are really on the upswing. But that they've captured the Justice Department. What do we do? Outside of calling, I don't think Joe Biden's going to fire his AG. I mean, that would be a political firestorm for him. Is there any other way I'm blithering here, Sarah. What do we do?
No, I think you should him anyway. And I do think, we have so many fifth columns in this country at this point. You could build a new White House with them. We have a serious problem of internal corruption. And I think, figures like Garelick really showcase how organized crime, white collar crime, and state corruption have merged in a really terrible way. The same way, plutocrats in the United States and oligarchs from abroad, they work in tandem. They work in these very elite, cloistered, protected networks, and they infiltrate governments. And it's not like a conspiracy in a wild sort of way. We know what the motive is. It's greed, it's power, it's money, and it's, immunity from prosecution. And that's why people like Merrick Garland are exceptionally useful. And the problem, I think, that the Biden administration faces and that Biden himself faces is this isn't new. This didn't happen under Trump. This has been building in the Department of Justice for decades. You can trace it back, certainly to like the Nixon era and probably before. And I think when people use the word institutionalist, they often use it as a sort of designator of, upright behavior, lawfulness, fidelity to, a continuation of institutional integrity. They should really be looking at it as a way of protecting people who don't have any integrity, who believe they're above the law, and then they use the apparatus of the law to make that true, to make themselves immune from criminal prosecution. That's what Bannon's doing now. That's what Trump did when he was in office. And, and you could go back to the Bush administration, the Reagan administration, Iran-Contra, all these different scandals. You see the same thing at play. And so to get rid of Merrick Garland, that's one thing they should do. But they need to clean house at the whole DOJ and have a new transparent agency, that shows what's going on to the American public. And the same is true, too, of the FBI. I think, Christopher Wray is just as troublesome, and they're working in tandem. And they also are both connected to the Federalist Society, which is another troubling issue altogether.
Oh, God. Sarah, we just have 50 seconds until I'm going to hit a hard break I can't control. What can the average person do? How can we influence the Biden administration or President Biden to clean house at the DOJ and to fire Merrick Garland?
Just keep telling the truth and telling it loudly, and don't worry about, party loyalty. Be loyal to your country. Be loyal to your principles. Let the chips fall where they may. Don't hold back.
But I mean, is this the sort of thing where we should be calling the White House comment line? We should be calling members of Congress, asking them to put pressure on?
Honestly, I see them responding to Twitter. They actually did this. Like the House January 6th committee responded to like a viral thread. That seems to be where they're hanging out, just like Trump did, on Twitter, on social media. So sadly, that is my advice. But yeah, do whatever you can. Call your senators, call the White House, make your voice known, protest, so on. Well,
I retweeted your tweet. So if anybody listening doesn't follow Sarah Kendzior on Twitter, you should, first of all. You can find it on my timeline or whatever it's called on Twitter. But Sarah, keep up the great work, and I love your podcast, Gaslit Nation. Thank you so much for dropping by today.
Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure. Sarah Kendzior. We'll be right back.